if there were chariots found in the Red Sea, it would probably have something to do with the crossing of the sea.
There is a battlefield at the bottom of the Red Sea. We're not talking about a single shipwreck. We're talking about an entire Egyptian army. A recent high-tech dive has just uncovered what amateur explorers have claimed for years. Hundreds of chariot wheels, horse skeletons, and human remains perfectly preserved in coral.
Is there any physical evidence on the seabed? Yes, there is. And we have some examples. Skeletons of humans, skeleton parts of horses and bulls, chariot wheels.
This finding doesn't just support an ancient story, it threatens to rewrite it. And get this, Egyptologists are completely silent. The implications of this find are staggering, and the story behind it is even crazier. The $10 million secret. So here's the deal. In late 2024, a small, highly secretive team of divers, engineers, and underwater archaeologists launched a private expedition. This wasn't a university-funded project you read about in a boring journal. This was a quiet, covert operation funded by private backers to the tune of over $10 million. They were equipped with technology that most archaeological teams can only dream of. Advanced side-scan sonar, military-grade remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, with high-definition 4K cameras and hypersensitive magnetometers. They weren't just looking for old pots or a stray anchor, they were looking for something specific. Something that mainstream science insisted did not exist. They were looking for the lost army of the Pharaoh. For decades, rumors and amateur reports had pointed to a very specific spot in the Red Sea's Gulf of Aqaba. The stories, often dismissed as fantasy, told of coral-encrusted chariot wheels, scattered bones, and the physical remnants of the Egyptian army from the biblical Exodus. For just as long, mainstream Egyptology and archaeology had laughed off these claims. They called it pseudoscience, a religious hoax, and wishful thinking. But this new team had a map. It was a map based on those old, ridiculed claims, and they had the technology to see what no one else could, or perhaps what no one else wanted to see. They started their search in a wide grid. For days, the sonar pulsed into the deep, scanning the seabed. Then the sonar operator saw it. Strange, symmetrical anomalies on his screen. These shapes were not natural rock formations. They were round, precise, and most chillingly, they were arranged in a long, linear trail. The team was stunned. The shapes looked exactly like wheels, hundreds of them. They deployed the ROV, a small submarine robot, sending it down into the dark, cold water hundreds of feet below the surface. The sub's high-powered lights cut through the gloom. At first, there was nothing but sand and rock. And then, suddenly, there it was, emerging from the sand, a perfectly round shape, completely covered in coral. It was, without a doubt, a wheel, an ancient spoked chariot wheel. As the ROV glided forward, its robotic arm brushing away the silt, another came into view, and another, and another. It was a debris field, a massive one. The site stretched for nearly a mile and a half. This was it. The team knew they had to go down themselves. This was too big to just observe through a camera. Elite deep-sea divers, many of them ex-military, prepared for a difficult and dangerous dive. As they descended into the silent deep, the sheer scale of the cataclysm became terrifyingly clear. This was not a single shipwreck. This was a military catastrophe, frozen in time. The sea floor was a war zone. It was littered with the remains of a fleeing or perhaps charging army. They saw wheels with 4 spokes, 6 spokes, and even 8 spokes. This detail is a massive wow factor. Why? Because these specific designs match perfectly the different types of chariots used by the Egyptian army during the New Kingdom period. The 4-spoked wheels were older, but the 6 and 8-spoked wheels were the new, high-tech, stable designs used by elite warriors and the Pharaoh himself. Finding them all jumbled together was a snapshot of the entire Egyptian chariot corps. But it wasn't just wheels. They found twisted metal fragments that looked like axles. They found what appeared to be the tangled, rectangular remains of the chariot cabs themselves, now just piles of corroded bronze and petrified wood, all fused to the seafloor by centuries of relentless coral growth. What most people don't realize is that the divers reported an overwhelming, eerie feeling of dread. They were swimming through an underwater graveyard. And then they found the bones. Tangled within the chariot debris, just as the old reports had claimed, were bone shards. Hundreds, possibly thousands of them. Some were clearly animal, the skulls, ribs, and femurs of horses, exactly where they would be if they were still harnessed to the chariots. But others were unmistakably human. Spines, pelvic bones, and fragments of skulls all mixed together in a chaotic, terrible jumble. This wasn't just an equipment dump. This was the final, watery resting place of hundreds, maybe thousands, of elite soldiers and their animals who all perished in a single, sudden, and violent event. The crazy part? One of the divers, sweeping a high-powered light over a mound of coral, caught a faint, unnatural glimmer. Beneath the crust, something was shining, a dull, unmistakable golden sheen. This matched the most incredible, most dismissed claim of all, that among the army's wreckage was a single gold-plated chariot wheel, perhaps belonging to a high-ranking general or even the Pharaoh. They couldn't touch it. The coral had locked it in place. To try and remove it would be to destroy it. The team documented everything. They took thousands of high-resolution photos and hours of high-definition video. They knew what they had found would send shockwaves through the world. They had found physical, tangible evidence that seemed to support one of the oldest and most foundational stories in human history. But here's the catch. This discovery, as monumental as it was, also opened up a massive can of worms. It challenged everything mainstream Egyptology had taught for the last 100 years. And that is why, when the initial findings were quietly shared with certain academics and institutions, the reaction was not excitement. It was silence. A cold, hard, frozen silence. But the discovery was just the first piece. The location was the second. A bridge at the bottom of the sea. So why this exact spot? What's so special about this random patch of the Gulf of Aqaba? Yeah, about that. This is where the story gets even more incredible. The location of the dive was not random. It was chosen because it's one of the most unique and bizarre underwater features on the entire planet. The Gulf of Aqaba, which separates the Sinai Peninsula from modern-day Saudi Arabia, is known for being extremely deep. We're talking about a massive underwater canyon that in most places plunges down to 5,000 or even 6,000 feet. That's over a mile straight down. It is a massive, impassable trench. Trying to cross it with an army of chariots or even on foot would be completely impossible. It is a sheer cliff of dark water, except for one very specific place. Right where the divers found the army, there is a massive flat land bridge that spans the entire Gulf. It's an underwater plateau stretching nearly 10 miles from the shore of a massive beach in Egypt called Nuweiba to the shore of Saudi Arabia. And get this, on either side of this bridge, the seabed plunges dramatically into those 5,000-foot deep abysses. But the bridge itself, it's relatively shallow. Now, shallow is a relative term. It's still about 900 feet deep at its deepest point, but compared to the mile-deep canyons on either side, it is a raised pathway. The sonar maps show it clearly, a distinct, massive underwater road 10 miles long and several miles wide. This underwater pathway is the only place in the entire 100-mile length of the Gulf of Aqaba that an ancient group of people could have even attempted to cross. What most people don't realize is that this geographical feature is a perfect one-to-one match for the ancient story. The biblical account describes the fleeing Israelites being trapped against the sea with mountains on either side and the Pharaoh's army closing in. The location at Nuweiba Beach is a perfect fit. It's a massive, sprawling beach, but it's completely walled in on either side by steep, impassable mountains. The only way in is from the west, and the only way out is forward into the sea, and right there at that exact spot is the underwater bridge. This geography is a massive wow factor because it's a detail that ancient writers could not possibly have known about. You can't see it from the surface. You can only find it with advanced sonar. Yet the story they told points directly to this one-of-a-kind location. The geography itself acts as a massive, silent piece of evidence, suggesting that something historic and catastrophic happened right here. A corridor can also be a trap. The linear distribution of the artifacts, the mile-and-a-half-long trail of wheels and bones, follows the path of this submerged bridge. It looks exactly like a group that was caught in the middle of the passage. This location also explains why the artifacts are still there. The 900-foot depth protected them from storms, ship anchors, and looters for millennia. And the unique currents created by the deep canyons on either side have trapped silt and sediment on the plateau. This sediment slowly buried the artifacts, and of course the warm, clear water is perfect for coral growth. The coral has acted like a natural concrete. It grew on the hard, solid surfaces of the chariots, the wood, the bronze, the leather. Over thousands of years, the wood rotted away and the metal corroded, but the coral held its shape. The divers weren't just finding wheels, they were finding wheel-shaped coral. They are essentially fossils of chariots. Without this specific geography and biology, any remnants would have been scattered and dissolved into nothing centuries ago. This land bridge, this perfect crossing, also explains the scale of the find. An entire army with hundreds of chariots, horses, and soldiers forced into this narrow 10-mile bottleneck would be completely and totally vulnerable. When the disaster struck, there was no escape. They couldn't go left. They couldn't go right. They were trapped. This tragic bottleneck explains the massive concentration of artifacts. It's a silent underwater testament to a cataclysmic event. The fact that this terrain is so unique also helps debunk one of the main skeptical arguments. Critics often say, oh, it's just a random shipwreck. But here's the deal. This isn't a shipwreck. It's hundreds of military chariots, all from the same time period, all found in a linear path on the only plausible land crossing in the entire Gulf. That's not a coincidence. That's a scene. This unique path wasn't found by accident. One man claimed it was there all along. The vindication of a madman? This entire incredible story, the secret expedition, the sonar maps, the frozen Egyptologists, it all goes back to one man. A man who was not a professor, not a famous archaeologist, and not part of the academic elite. His name was Ron Wyatt, and for decades, the entire world thought he was a complete crank. So here's the deal with Ron Wyatt. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee. He was also a passionate, deeply religious, self-taught biblical adventurer. Driven by an unshakable, literal belief that the stories in the Bible were physical, locatable history, he spent his life and his own money trying to find the physical proof. He was the definition of an amateur, an outsider, and that's putting it lightly. In the 1970s, Wyatt became obsessed with finding the true Red Sea crossing. He dismissed the traditional Reed Sea theories, small, marshy lakes in northern Egypt. He followed the biblical clues, which he believed pointed to a massive body of water deep enough to drown an army. His search led him to the Gulf of Aqaba, and specifically to the massive mountain-locked beach of Nuweiba. He reasoned with simple logic that if this was the spot where the Israelites were trapped, then this must be the spot where the sea parted. And if that was true, then the remains of Pharaoh's army must be at the bottom of the Gulf, right on that underwater land bridge. So in 1978, armed with basic scuba gear, a small boat, and a lot of faith, he did something no one else had bothered to do. He dived down. What he claimed to find was exactly what the new $10 million expedition just verified. He reported seeing coral-encrusted chariot wheels. He even claimed to have recovered a hub from one. He took blurry, grainy underwater photos, which were easy to dismiss as interestingly shaped coral. But he didn't stop there. On later dives, he claimed to have found more. He reported finding human bones and horse bones, all mixed in with the chariot parts. And he made his most explosive claim of all. He said he had found and filmed the legendary golden chariot wheel gleaming faintly beneath the coral. When Ron Wyatt presented his findings, the academic world didn't just ignore him. They ridiculed him. They tore him apart. He was labeled a fraud, a pseudoscience peddler, and a religious zealot who was just seeing what he wanted to see. Egyptologists and archaeologists were frozen in a state of complete and total dismissal. And get this, Wyatt's other claims made him an even bigger target. He also claimed to have found Noah's Ark, the true location of Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia right across from Nuweiba, the ashes of the red heifer, and even most fantastically the Ark of the Covenant, hidden in a cave under Jerusalem. To the mainstream scientific community, this wasn't research. It was a fantasy-fueled treasure hunt. His Red Sea claims were thrown out along with everything else. For over 40 years, the site was dismissed as a myth, a conspiracy, and nothing but coral and wishful thinking. But here's the catch. Ron Wyatt passed away in 1999, his claim still almost universally mocked. But he left behind his research, he left his maps, he left the exact coordinates of the underwater land bridge and the debris field he had found. The secret high-tech expedition in 2024? They weren't diving blind, they were following Ron Wyatt's map, and their $10 million sonar and high-definition cameras were verifying one by one the impossible claims that the nurse from Tennessee had been making all along. The sonar confirmed the land bridge, the ROVs confirmed the wheels, the 4, 6, and 8-spoked wheels, just as he said. The divers confirmed the bones, and they even saw the glint of gold that Wyatt had reported. This is the core of the controversy. The experts who dismissed Wyatt for decades are now faced with high-tech data that proves he was, at the very least, right about the existence of a massive, ancient underwater debris field. The discovery is forcing a reevaluation of a man everyone had agreed was a fool, and it's forcing a terrifying reevaluation of how this impossible event could have ever happened, because the how is where the theories get really wild. Chasing a stolen superweapon. This is the big question. If there's an army at the bottom of the sea, how did it get there? The ancient story says the sea parted, the Israelites walked across on dry ground, and the waters then collapsed on the pursuing Egyptian army. Mainstream science says that's impossible, but the evidence is there. So what really happened in the Gulf of Aqaba? This is where the theories get wild. Wild theory. Number 1, the volcano tsunami. This is a big one. What if the miracle was actually a perfectly timed natural disaster? Around 3,500 years ago, a massive volcano on the Greek island of Santorini, then called Thera, exploded. This was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. It was a planet-altering event. This mega eruption, hundreds of miles away, would have created a massive tsunami that radiated across the Mediterranean. But what most people don't realize is that tsunamis have a famous, terrifying signature: the drawback. Before the giant wave hits, the sea recedes. The water is pulled back suddenly and dramatically, often for miles, exposing the seabed. To an ancient person who had never seen this, it would look like a miracle. The sea literally parting. So, here's the theory. The Israelites are trapped at Nuweiba. The Thera eruption causes a massive tidal drawback in the Red Sea. The water pulls back, exposing the 10-mile land bridge. It's a miracle. They run across. The Egyptian army, seeing their path, charges after them onto the exposed, muddy seabed. But here's the catch. The drawback is just the first part. The second part is the wave returning. Just as the Egyptian army, with its heavy, wheel-bogged chariots, reaches the middle of the Gulf, the tsunami hits. A wall of water hundreds of feet high roars back into the Gulf, annihilating the entire army in an instant. It's a scientific explanation that fits the story almost perfectly. The timing, the parting, and the collapse of the walls of water. Wild theory number 2, the Ark of the Covenant. This theory is even wilder, and it connects directly back to Ron Wyatt. Remember how Wyatt claimed to find both the chariot wheels and the Ark of the Covenant? What if those two discoveries are linked? What if the Israelites weren't just fleeing with their families? What if they had just stolen Egypt's most powerful secret? A lot of non-mainstream theories propose that the Ark of the Covenant wasn't just a religious box. They say it was a piece of advanced, lost technology, a massive electrical capacitor, an energy source, or even a weapon. So, here's the new story. The Israelites, led by Moses, who was raised in the Pharaoh's court and had access to its secrets, steal this powerful device. The Pharaoh is enraged. He's not just chasing to get his slaves back, he's chasing to get his superweapon back. The Israelites are trapped at the sea. The Egyptian army closes in, so Moses uses the device. The Ark of the Covenant unleashes an unknown force, maybe a localized gravity field, maybe a massive energy pulse that pushes the water apart, creating the dry path. The Israelites cross. The Egyptians, blinded by rage, charge in after them. Once they are all in the kill box, Moses, or the Ark itself, switches off the device. The walls of water held back by this unknown energy collapse. The army is destroyed. This theory is wild, but it answers a lot of questions. It explains the pillar of fire and cloud, the energy signature of the Ark. It explains why Pharaoh would risk his entire elite army, and it explains the supernatural power of the event. Wild theory number 3, lost acoustic technology. This one is straight out of science fiction. Some theorists propose that ancient civilizations, maybe even a pre-Egyptian one, understood the power of sound and frequency. What if the parting of the sea wasn't a miracle or a volcano, but a technological event? What if the staff of Moses was some kind of tonal resonator, a piece of lost tech that, when activated, created a specific sound frequency? A frequency so powerful it could literally push water, creating a parting through acoustic levitation. This sonic weapon would have held the water back only to be deactivated once the army was inside. Whether it was a volcano, a superweapon, or lost technology, all these theories point to the same conclusion. Something happened in that gulf. Something powerful enough to wipe an army off the face of the earth, leaving its remains to be fossilized in coral, waiting to be found. But if the proof is there, why the silence? What are they hiding? This brings us to the core of the title, the very heart of this entire mystery. Why are Egyptologists and mainstream archaeologists frozen? It's not from awe, it's not from excitement. It's from a combination of pure academic disbelief, professional self-preservation, and perhaps a genuine, terrifying fear of what this discovery actually means for the world. So, here's the deal. For over 100 years, the consensus among almost all secular Egyptologists is that the Exodus, as described in the Bible, did not happen. Period. At least not on the impossible scale the story claims. They teach this in every university, from Cairo to Harvard. It's written in every textbook. It is the dogma. They argue very logically that there is zero archaeological evidence in the Sinai Desert for 2 million people, a population the size of a modern city wandering for 40 years. They demand, where are the campsites? Where are the mass graves? Where is the pottery? They argue correctly that there is no mention in any Egyptian hieroglyph, no record on any papyrus of their entire army, their most valuable military asset, their charioteers, being destroyed in a single catastrophic day. The entire foundation of modern Egyptology, its timelines, its king lists, its understanding of the 18th dynasty's power, its history, it's all built on a framework that does not include this event. It's a framework that cannot include this event. To them, it's a myth. A powerful story of cultural foundation, but a myth nonetheless. Now suddenly, a team of divers following the map of a man, Ron Wyatt, who everyone in the serious academic world dismissed as a crank, a charlatan, a religious dreamer, they find a massive underwater debris field. A field that doesn't just hint at the story, it matches it perfectly. We're not talking about 1 or 2 broken pots, we're talking about hundreds of chariots. We're talking about wheels, axles, and cabinets scattered across the seafloor. And not just any chariots. The specific 6-spoke and 8-spoke designs used only by the Egyptian army of the 18th dynasty. The exact right time period. At the exact right location, a massive natural land bridge cutting across the deep gulf, with the exact kind of geography the story implies. If this site is real, then the experts were wrong, and that's putting it lightly. This discovery doesn't just add a new chapter to history, it tears out all the old ones. It would mean that the ancient texts were not just stories, but accurate, literal, historical accounts. A tenured professor who has built their entire 30-year career, their entire reputation, on the Exodus as myth theory cannot suddenly turn around and say, oops, guess that nurse from Tennessee was right all along. Their career would be over. Their life's work would be meaningless. Every book they published would be fiction. Every student they mentored would have been taught a lie. So they are frozen. They are silent. The safest thing to do is to ignore it, to attack the source, to call it unverified, pseudoscience, or misinterpreted. They will argue it's just a shipwreck graveyard from many different eras, even though the evidence points to a single massive chaotic event. They will say the coral-encrusted wheels are just coral formations or modern debris, even when the shapes are unmistakable. They will demand impossible standards of proof for this one site while accepting far less for their own pet theories. They are gatekeepers, and this discovery is a battering ram at their gates. They will never ever give an inch because giving an inch means their entire ivory tower comes crumbling down. But the wild theory here is that it goes deeper. What if it goes deeper than just a few dozen academic careers? What if this is a global conspiracy? Think about it. Really, think. If this site is proven beyond any doubt to be the remains of the Pharaoh's army, it would be seen as physical, tangible, scientific proof of one of the foundational miracles of the Old Testament. In a world full of religious and political tension, what would that do? It would elevate one set of religious beliefs backed by physical proof above all others. It would validate the claims of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam in one fell swoop. That's not just academically disruptive, that's geopolitically disruptive. It's an earthquake. What about other world religions? What about purely secular, atheistic governments who have built their entire state on the idea that religion is a fantasy? Do you think those powers want billions of people to suddenly have physical proof of God's direct intervention in history? It's a geopolitical time bomb. It threatens the balance of global power. And what do powerful people do when they are threatened by an inconvenient truth? They don't debate it. They bury it. They make the problem disappear. This is where the story gets its most urgent. This is where it gets chilling. The evidence is vanishing. Let's talk about that golden chariot wheel that Ron Wyatt claimed he found. He said it was a 4-spoke wheel, the kind used only by the highest royalty, maybe the Pharaoh himself. He claimed he brought it to the surface, documented it, and that its existence was reported to the Egyptian authorities, thinking they would be ecstatic. And then, poof, it vanished. There are no official photos. There is no museum record, no official statement. The one piece of smoking gun proof that could have verified the entire story is gone. Skeptics, the same frozen experts, laugh and say, see, he made it all up. It never existed. But what if he didn't? What if it was confiscated? What if it was taken and buried in a deep, dark vault, a place like the warehouse at the end of Indiana Jones, a secret so explosive it can never be allowed to see the light of day? It gets worse, much worse. The new 2024 expedition, comparing their new high-tech, high-resolution sonar maps to Wyatt's original maps and photos from the 70s and 80s, has reported something deeply disturbing. Large sections of the debris field, they seem to have been altered, cleared. Areas that Wyatt claimed were dense with artifacts, places he labeled chariot parts and skeletal remains, are now suspiciously barren. Is this just natural erosion? Is it just the currents of the Red Sea which have been flowing for 3,500 years? Or is it a cleanup operation? The new team has reported seeing drag marks on the seafloor. Marks that look like massive objects were hooked and pulled away. This isn't nature. This is surgical. Is it possible that in the 40 years since Wyatt first found it, someone has been slowly, quietly, and systematically removing the evidence, erasing the history from the bottom of the sea? We are in a race against time. The site is incredibly fragile. The coral fossils, the human and horse remains encased in mineral deposits, are being eroded by currents. But the human element, that is the real threat. The experts are frozen because they are standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind them is their entire life's work, their reputation, their comfortable, established world. In front of them is a dark, deep gulf, full of impossible evidence. Evidence that threatens to pull them and all of established history under. And while they stand there, silent and paralyzed, the shadows are moving. The evidence is disappearing. The truth isn't just being ignored, it's being actively and methodically destroyed. So is this the world's greatest archaeological find or a massive 40-year-old hoax? And if it's real, who is so desperate to erase it? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.